Today I'm going to be talking about China, and I will admit, before April, I knew, Kung Fu, Bruce Lee. I in no way would claim to be a China expert. Recently I was on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Special Study Group for the Value Added of Higher Education. And when we came together for a meeting in Washington, D.C., there were 15 of us, and 14 were very high-level people at prestigious universities, and me, a geographer. And when I came around to me to introducing myself, I said, I solve spatial puzzles. That's it. And I'm committed to that. If we're going to change education, we have to solve the spatial puzzle. I would say about 30% of you have read my book that I published with Oxford University Press on solving spatial puzzles for business. This is going to be solving a spatial puzzle about China. I want to do what American businesses do in the United States in terms of evaluating where to locate a multi-branch retail outlet, where to buy a Class A office building, financing, mortgages, and so forth. And China is going through a transition of being a state-owned to being privately owned. So they're going through that transition. And in the United States, I'm a fellow of the Miller Center for Retail at the University of Florida. And most of the multi-branch retailers in the United States are supporters of that center. And so they come in for continuing education. And then if it's something to deal with the spatial puzzle, then I'm the one that gives a talk. And then what I kept hearing from them is we want to know about China. I know nothing about China. So you say, well, why am I here today? Well, I'm here to declare to you that the information revolution is over. It's here, it's now, it's no longer revolutionary. So I go from April until today, what you'll see today. I kept hearing from American businesses, we don't know anything about China. We need to be able to make better decisions in China. Nixon goes to China, but a geographer can bring China to you. And that's what we're going to see today. The takeaway for you is we're going to learn about data. We're going to learn about some concepts. And I've got a variety of people in here, so I want to be relevant to all of you. We'll go through some of the concepts. I will introduce you to some procedures that we do in the United States, very basic. And we'll try to replicate them in China. This is to get you going. In talking to the folks at the Esri booth out there, they don't have China right now. So you only have China here. But they said, after November, they're going to be obsolete. They'll have China. And that's part of the role of being a practitioner scholar or a scholar practitioner. The objective is, and I know I have done a good job, if I've made myself obsolete, I want to be obsolete. And then I can go on to the next version. If I haven't made myself obsolete, it's because I'm either A, not doing a good job, or B, I have not received the support from my employer to make myself obsolete. And so by obsolescence, I can go on to the next version of Thrall, whatever that happens to be. Geographic information systems, which is my specialty, is descriptive. That's all it is. We describe. We used to, like in the Doomsday book in England with William the Conqueror, they describe the landscape. And that's all GIS is doing, but with, the technology of the day. Fabulous technology. After description, we look at a pattern on a map, and we want to explain it. Why this pattern versus some other pattern? What do I anticipate in the future? So after I have explanation, that requires theory. And theory can be a formal mathematical model. I can develop conjectures, hypotheses. It's not theory until it's been proven statistically. And so we get into prediction. So I can forecast what it is going to be in the future. And why I'm interested in that is because I want to make a decision, judgment. Now, the same person doesn't have to do every one of these steps. So you might have on your payroll somebody who is a GIS techie that can just click the keyboard around it. And it's not necessarily something that a high-level manager would need to do. But as we go further on up, after we've made the judgment, which is based upon experience, we're not automating judgment here. We're feeding information into making judgment. Then we implement it. I like the Star Trek Picard, make it so. And then we manage it. And then there's got to be a feedback loop that goes back to the GIS people. Don't expect them to push it to you. You have to know enough about geospatial reasoning and geospatial technology to pull it from them and evaluate whether they have done the job you need. That's important. So you cannot leave it to your GIS techies. The burden falls upon you to provide the feedback, to understand what's going on. Here's a shameless plug for my book, Oxford University Press. I'm very delighted to have had feedback from a lot of you saying, oh yeah, I read it, it's on my permanent place on my desk, and that's wonderful. And in this book, I take the approach that we have steps in site selection. We calculate a trade area, we calculate within that trade area competitive supply, we calculate demand. Each one of these is a challenge intellectually, a challenge for data, challenge for methodology, and then we calculate the absorption analysis. Well, there are companies, Esri is one example. By the way, I have written several hundred software and data reviews in technology magazines over the years, so I try not to give any bias towards one company or another. You'll see several competing companies referenced in my presentation. This just happens to be an example from Esri. And Esri has, it's actually not Esri, it's CCIM has a web page called Site to Do Business. And Site to Do Business allows you to calculate gap or leakage. So that's basically like what we have here, absorption analysis. Are we undersupplied or are we oversupplied? And if we have leakage, that's because people are going elsewhere outside of our trade area, and calculating the trade area is itself a complicated thing. It's not just a circle. But they're going outside of the trade area to purchase the good or service. And so that's a gap in leakage. And Esri CCIM, Certified Commercial Investment Member Institute, has automated this on stdb.com. And so we have the calculation for gap or leakage by NAICS code. And for the current, it could be because it's an overlooked opportunity. Or we would project population growth or change in demand into the future and anticipate where the gap will be, where the gap will be, and what the gap will be in. And this in the small print is just a sample of what you get. This is for somewhere in the United States. It doesn't matter. I phoned up a CCIM friend of mine and I said, just run a standard report, and this is what we get. And what we see is the green is we have a lot of green in motor vehicle for this particular location, for its trade area, and that may be what I would want to target for my shopping center. And this particular place was not filled up. I said, well, what are they doing? They should be going after, maybe a regional automobile superstore. So we identify, so that's the benefit of this to a shopping center. And it's also a benefit to the retailer where you see that there's a gap or leakage for a restaurant or whatever, then that may signal an opportunity to you to investigate further. One of the studies I did was for the Florida Board of Governors. This is the organization that oversees the campuses, I believe we have 12 now, in the state university system. That would include University of Florida, Florida State, University of Central Florida, and so forth. And so they brought in as their vice chair, and I forget his name, I apologize, but he was the former CEO of Burger King. And he said, I can't be on the Board of Governors making decisions on the statewide university system without seeing the type of reports that I see or saw as the CEO of Burger King. So they looked around and they hired me. And the bad news was, when I was interviewed, was that I was a professor at the University of Florida. The good news was I was tenured and a full professor, and that made me relatively immune to fallback if the UF did not show up well. And in fact, it didn't. Oh, okay, there's a punchline. So first thing I did, one of the things I did, you can access, this is still on my website at University of Florida, which remains static. I don't have access to it. They view it as their property, their asset. And so you can go there and click on it and see my full report that I did for the Board of Governors, which included population projections. And note that I'm doing my projections by standard geographic area. In this case, it's a 6 by 6 mile grid. So in geography, I like to say, like I did in economics, ceteris paribus, all other things being equal. You want to hold your geographic container constant. So you're not evaluating the container like a zip code or a census tract. You're evaluating the phenomena. And so with GIS, you can aggregate to a regular ceteris paribus holding geography constant. And now I did what I call a yuppie map. And you can bias people's perception by doing this type of tilt in 3D. But I think it's still allows what we want to do is visually communicate a descriptive concept. This is description. And I can immediately see where, and I did this back in 05, I think it was. We can immediately see where the population is projected to change. So if I am anticipating a gap somewhere, I might want to avoid the panhandle. I might want to go on the I-4 corridor between Tampa and Orlando. I might want to go to southeast Florida or parts of southwest Florida. So I immediately see this. And so we are incorporating this into, as the GIS person, you say, I want to see a map like this, but for my target place. And I'll show you some maps like this that I made for China and how to do it. But it's not just any old people. It depends upon what kind of people you're looking at. And, talking to the membership in this room, most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with psychographics, lifestyle segmentation profiles. Esri has a good product, Tapestry, MapInfo that Tony was involved with has a site, and then there's Experian and others out there. So there's a lot of competitive supply of this stuff. This happens to be what I have on my desktop. And what psychographics do is segment people by their consumption profile. So we're not, you see that on the horizontal axis in this graph, it's income. There's a wide range of income. What we are interested in is what, to draw upon some economics, what Paul Samuelson wrote about in the 1950s is revealed preference. How do I know what people want? How do I know what the utility is, speaking economies? Well, geez, you look at what they spend, what they buy. All right? And one of the earlier sessions was on big data. And so we can track people's expenditure patterns and then segment people into, I think Tapestry has 64 like-kind groups, which in turn can be combined into other groups that are statistically similar. And so these represent different buckets of like-kind consumption. Like analysis of variance, we can statistically say that somebody who's an L1 consumes like other L1s. And you can find this is readily available, well, in my PowerPoint that you'll see at I Do XYZ, Life Mode. You can download the stuff from Esri's webpage. It tells you these are high society people and their income is over $100,000 a year. And 7 people are high hopes. And so people that are L7s can consume more like each other than they consume more like L1s. That doesn't mean their incomes are the same. Their incomes can be the same, they can be different. It's not about income, it's about revealed preference. This is how people actually consume. And so in the process that we follow in multi-branch retailing that I like to follow and I discuss in my book is that I, first of all, calculate the latitude, longitude coordinates based upon addresses. This happens to be students at University of Florida. And so this is 95% of students come from Florida that are enrolled there. So I have their parents' addresses. So this is indirect calculation of the psychographics within your trade areas. You'll see, I know where the student's permanent address is. Now, I know that some of the students are using their grandparents' permanent address to get in-state tuition. And because it comes up as senior styles. So, that's no secret, okay? I don't make the rules for who's in-state and who's out-of-state. I can just tell you who's legit and who's not. And so we know where the students are, and we know what the lifestyle segmentation profiles are based upon where their parents are, where their permanent address is. And we can do this for any university. So I've just finished a project with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on the value added of higher education. So the challenge was you have a student input, you have a student output from the university, and so what's the value added of the university? And so I was on this committee with some very prestigious people from education. I just said, I solved spatial puzzles. There's a spatial puzzle. The inputs are different. These are the inputs of students at East Tennessee State University, at University of Memphis, where I was an endowed chair for a year, University of Tennessee, Knoxville. So Memphis and Knoxville have very similar psychographic compositions. It looks like about 30% of University of Tennessee's and University of Memphis's students are L1s and L2s. That's a very different type of value system than we see at East Tennessee State University, where they have at most 10% of their student population comprised of L1 and L2. So what that should tell you is, we have different inputs. We would expect then different outputs. Well, if we had the same output, then it's perhaps more challenging for East Tennessee to have the same output as a Memphis or a Knoxville. So we have to then look at that granularity. And what is the value of that to you in retail? Well, now I have the students' lifestyle segmentation profiles based upon their home addresses. And I also know where their school address is while they're attending University of Florida. I mapped it. This happens to be a map of just L1 students. Okay, unlike University of Memphis and University of Tennessee, which have about 35% of their students being L1 and L2, over 50% of University of Florida students are L1s and L2s. Doesn't matter whether they're Hispanic. I mean, you cut it down by saying, well, is there a difference by race, ethnicity, and so forth? No, if you're Hispanic, you're going to be an L1 or L2. If you're black, you're going to be an L1 or L2. That's the probability. There's no differences there. So what that information then is that I know what kind of students I have, and I can now gear a university value platform around like what I would do a multi-branch retailer. I need to do that. I am catering to a certain category of students. And I don't want to, I might profile. Not every university in Florida should be a University of Florida. They can't be. Well, then there'll be something else. In fact, the University of Florida several years ago announced, well, we're going to increase our student enrollments by 2,500 students. So I calculated which groups increased the most. Well, L1s were 44% and L2s were 8%. So half of the student increase that the University of Florida said that it would do to serve its mission came from L1s and L2s. Okay? So that's not representative of the population of the state, nor should it be. It's got a value platform. So now we get to judgment. And this is what I call the money slide. So my money slide to the Board of Governors that oversees the 11 campus state university system was that I can look at University of Florida's here. Modest population increases. Only member of the prestigious Association of American Universities, which are presumably, by some metric, the best universities in the country, and plus we beat the University of Tennessee last in football. Okay, and students are drawn from across the state, and the problem that UF has is that if you are in the shadow of University of Florida, you might be a B+ or A- student. But UF is cherry picking the absolute best students in terms of performance and achievement in education in the state. And that means you might be really good, but you're not going to get into the University of Florida. You may only live 20 miles from the University of Florida. So the Board of Governors used this information as input, and they then made their adjustment. They didn't have to know all the clicks on the keyboard that I did to get here. They looked at the money slide, they looked at the reasoning, all which is on the internet, and they said, well, what we need is, based upon population pressures, we'll have to build a university the size of the University of Florida with 52,000 students every year and a half. We don't have the money for that. But what we can do is change the value platform of the community colleges in the state to be state colleges. So it may have seemed unreasonable to a lot of people. Why change the community college in Gainesville to be a 4-year state college? And the reason is local need wasn't being served. There was gap. There was leakage. So it works in education. And one of the messages I want to bring to you, having done these kinds of studies in education, is my personal opinion as education is about the worst run private good industry in the United States. And in 10 years' time, it ain't going to be the same thing as it is today. And I'll get back to that. Now we're going to make a decision. And this, by the way, was done by students of mine in one of my classes that I was teaching at the University of Florida. So we would have a project. And what the project was, well, let's reverse engineer a multi-branch retailer's location strategy. And so this, I won't tell you the name of the restaurant. It's a high, for Gainesville, perhaps for most places, not here, but a high end. It was like $25 a plate tabletop restaurant. And there was one in Gainesville, which recently closed down. And so I had my students inconspicuously go to the restaurant and profile the people as they went into the restaurant, based upon what kind of cars they were driving, what they looked like, what they thought they were. And then we arrived at a consensus out of 64 categories. The consensus of the group was that these were 1, 2s, 3s, 5s, 7s, 9s, 15. It doesn't matter what the words were. This is what the count was. And then using 5-digit zip code data, we overlaid a 6-by-6 mile grid, which corresponds to the American Survey System, over the zip codes. And each zip code had a count of population by each tapestry segmentation group. And looking at the map, here I can quickly see, well, geez, they seem to be following the red. Okay? Now let's make a decision. Now we're up to judgment. Where will this unnamed multi-branch tabletop restaurant go next? Okay? Spatial decisions. Okay, time's up. Okay, look at all the red here. There's no facilities here, and there's a little bit of red here, but this looks like the highest low-hanging fruit that could support two. And I will say, without my permission, I did not authorize them to do this. And so if you're sitting in the audience, it's not my fault. They called up the CEO of this multi-branch restaurant chain, and they told him what they did. And his first response is happening. Well, it's publicly available data. And he said, okay, I give up. Where am I going to locate? And they said, you're going to locate here. And he said, yes, in the east, southeast, we have just gone under contract, and it hasn't been publicly announced that that's where we're going to build it. So that's the power of geospatial reasoning. You in here, most of you are management. You don't need to know how to use the complex GIS. I do because I grew up with it. But if you're a high-level manager, you don't need to know that. But you do need to know somebody in the staff that you can tell, and it has to come from you. This is what I want. And then you need to be able to think spatially and tell them what you want, and then come up with an appropriate decision. Okay, trade areas. This is itself a complicated thing. I'm not going to get the complexity is too great for my time here. But there are different methods to calculate trade areas. The one I happen to favor is the one, of course, has my name on it. And it received the Tortel Wheaton Award for Best Real Estate Market Analysis a couple of years ago. And that paper is referenced where you can jump to it. And I used that trade. How important is it? I used the algorithm that I and my colleagues created, spatial statistical algorithm, to derive a trade area, and I will not reveal where this is, but it was an actual litigation where the State Department of Transportation was taking a property of an small automobile dealership that was, at most a half an acre. And they said, well, the property is worth $125,000. The person who owned that dealership said, I'm getting lowballed. Contacted an attorney. They looked on the internet. They found me. And I said, oh, yeah, that's an interesting case. So the first thing I did was, and this is in the book, The Appraisal of Real Estate, one requirement of appraisal, if you're using the comparable method, is that it must. It's not a choice. It's not. It would be really great if it must come from the same trade area. Or if it's not from the same trade area, the burden falls upon the MAI to document that the trade areas are equivalent. It's not a choice. You've got to do that. Okay, well, this person chose comparables that were 6 miles from the interstate and also not in the trade area, as revealed by award-winning trade area algorithms. So that's best practices. There was no choice. The court had to throw out, that was a fatal error, had to throw out the appraisal that was not liked. And then they negotiated based upon some reasoning that I gave them, not for $125,000, but for $750,000. That's the importance of correct calculation, what we're doing. All right, now, China. Information revolution is over with. Okay? I don't know anything about China. And businesses come into the Miller Center for Retail and they say, we want to know about China. Well, Grant will do it. Okay, well, so I start doing it. And I look on the internet. And I reach out to my contact network. And then they reach out to their contact network. Within a short time, let's say up to today, I haven't been to China. In fact, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to China. I've been invited by the nation of China, People's Republic of China, to be a keynote speaker at their conference on valuation. What kind of data should they have that I don't get today? So I've gone from, knowing about Bruce Lee and Kung Fu to now being, invited to go on a lecture tour of China. Cool. It's not about the information. That's over with. What it is we're in the knowledge revolution today. It's what do you do with that information that's readily available? Now, you have to buy some of that information. It's not all free. A whole lot of it that I'm going to show you is free. It's not about it's not about the information. It's there. And if it's not there, it's going to be there. It's about what are you going to do with it, and how does that work into improving your business decision. This is a point map with the hotels that have agreed to share their information with Smith Travel Research, STR. And that is an international consortium of hotels. They are a supporter of the American Real Estate Society, and they have agreed that they would give us academics free access to their international database of hotels. And so this is str.com. And so, okay, so I'm starting to get going. I'm looking at China, and at least I know where the marquee hotels are, and some of the information on their performance and their characteristics. And then I find at a website called OpenStreetMap, where I can download an Esri shapefile, SHP we call it, file, which is actually a collection of files. And I can bring that readily into my geographic information system software, which in fact I'm using the software program here to show my diversity and fairness to all. Very nice product called Maptitude that costs $650 from a company in Boston, Caliper, CALRPER.com. So I brought in my shapefile into Maptitude. And here we see the road grid for Florida. And then I decide I want to look at China. So I'm not going to start out at the high level like, should I be investing in China or Germany? We can do that. But I wanted to get down to the granular level, which we call large scale. And large scale is where I can actually see the streets, whereas small scale, I can't. So I want to get down to where the rubber hits the road in our industry and make a location decision. And this is a map that I made with Maptitude. They have, a little bit of data in it. With OpenStreetMap layers, and I've also added in the STR hotels, but the point of interest information is also available for hotels by name, for the American and other businesses. So you have a restaurant, and if it's got a name like McDonald's, you can pretty much sure, or Starbucks, you can map them out. And I've got a map here of the Starbucks. We could do the same. I did the same for Kentucky Fried Chicken and so forth. So here we have a satellite image, and this is from a nice book that the U.S. government has produced called the China Business Handbook. So if you don't know about this and you're thinking about going to China, download this. It's free, the China Business Handbook. And this is a satellite image. Well, you can see that there's a whole lot more lights on the right for 2010 than 2000. Well, in GIS, you can use those lights, that change in luminosity, to give you an index for the change in development. So if all you have is 2,000 population data, and you see a change in luminosity, either A, the Chinese know that a satellite's flying over, they're flipping on all the lights like they did in World War II to fool the Germans in England. Or B, we actually have urban growth going on here. And I don't think the Chinese would waste electricity, so I think it's probably well representative of what's going on. So this information with the GIS can be used to update their population projections. And we know that it's population change then, as we've heard elsewhere in this conference, population change drives real estate values. And population change, the adage, is rooftops before retail. So what we're doing, what we can do then is identify gap by the change in luminosity. That's where we're at today in the technology. And the information is there, but we want to incorporate that into our judgment, into our knowledge. It's the knowledge revolution. So the data that I'm going to be showing you originates with the National Bureau of Statistics in China. And they have a deal with the University of Michigan, which sometimes beats the University of Florida, sometimes not, in football, American football. And the really excellent guy there named Shuman Bao that I was introduced to by way of email. And he controls the flow of official China data into the United States through the University of Michigan. And he also has a faculty appointment somewhere in China. And then there's a company, Demographic Consulting, and Sheila is here somewhere. Where are you, Sheila? I can't see because of the, oh, no, there's Sheila. Stand up, Sheila. See, I did make you stand up because everybody knows you. This is Sheila. And Sheila is here to represent, she doesn't have a booth here, but she was here to represent Demographic Consulting. They were really great in assisting me to prepare this for you. And they gave me a lot of data, including percentage change in population and property, what it costs to buy a house or to rent. And we did this by grid. So what I did in my GIS software is I said, they wouldn't let me have the original source data. The Chinese government wouldn't let that. Well, how about this? I like grid data for the reasons that you've already heard. Let's start out with 100 square kilometer grid. So we're looking at Beijing in the center with a lot of red there with the McDonald's hamburger stands on it. So that gives us a mental point of reference. And each grid is 100 square kilometers, about 66 square miles on a side. And then if I'm going for the area with the big population change, so follow the red. Okay, now I discount everywhere else except for there. I'm going to go for where the gap is going to be. That I've already told you. All right, now I'm going to make my grid smaller. Now I gave them grids that were spatially congruent, so my 25 square kilometer grid would fit inside my 100 square mile grid. And so now we're getting higher resolution. We're getting down there and it's telling me, well, the population increase is McDonald's or something. They're going where the population change is the greatest. Okay, now I'm getting even further down, a 10 square kilometer grid. Now, I kept my green lines on there, so we would, otherwise I could have eliminated their display. I wanted to show you, I'm looking at a 10 square mile grid. And now I'm zooming in, still with the 10 square kilometer grids on where McDonald's is. And it looks like, the population change in downtown Beijing, in central Beijing, is greatest. Well, hold on there. Okay, now going further, and here we have the growth rate, and in those grids, we see that there is a greater percentage change to the northwest. So, as I kept hearing from people that say, oh, the Chinese cities are so different from the United States cities. The United States, you might remember the work of Homer Hoyt that came up to, cities are sectorial. Well, Chinese cities are sectorial too. Well, lo and behold, they do follow market processes, and the market processes give rise to sectoriality. And so we see that the growth rate is to the northwest and not right downtown. Now, right downtown, growth rate might be lower because the land is being converted to office buildings. Okay, something's going on there. So McDonald's is targeting the office building conversion market. Anybody from McDonald's here? If you were, you probably would not raise your hand because you don't want to confirm what I just said. Okay, so we can reverse engineer, even in China. And now we have the median price to purchase a home. Well, like in the United States, there's been a lot of suburbanization in China, and that's where the prices are higher. But note, this has not been standardized by square foot. So the price per square foot in the central areas may be higher, but if you have to buy a lot of square footage out in the suburbs, then the house price will be more. That's what we're seeing here. And this is from one of my YouTube videos. Let's say that we have housing prices, the cost of rental or the cost of ownership circa 2000. How value is that today? They'll soon release this for 2010. So it's coming down the road just in November, I think. What can we use the general theory for to give us better judgment on what's going on with property values? Well, property values, unlike what some pundits may have told you to buy a property, an investment property, when property values were going up in a straight line, oh yeah, they'll just keep going on like that. They never go like that. When Forrest Gump is sitting at Seaside, Florida, and he's sitting on a bench and he says, life is but just a bunch of chocolates, and which one you choose is just random. That's what life is. Forrest Gump is so wrong. That is just totally wrong. Life is not a random box of chocolates. Life is ordered, and life is a logistic S-curve. We know what its shape is, we know what the equation is, and we know how to estimate. And that's how real estate values go, including build out, absorption, and gap. They all reach it in essence of it. This is the median price. The China story is a story of urbanization, where the younger people are and people with children are going into the cities like Beijing. They're not uniformly distributed around Beijing, but they are in sectors. They're not in the rural areas. Okay, so here we have percent population 5 to 35. We can see that those people are in Beijing, and they're not out there in the countryside. So the countryside is growing old. I have in this, I will let you go through this because I want to have some time for Q&A. John Wu, who is a real estate market analyst, a very capable person in GIS and knowledgeable of China. He's in China, and he's doing a big development right now. And he was courteous to allow me to include his slides in this deck, which has really some great information on China. It's projected that by 2020, he projects that China will have more square footage of office space than Western Europe. And it doesn't now. So if China is not on your radar screen, it should be. Resources for your staff or you. OpenStreetMap, what kind of layers you can download. You can play around with other cities, see where the KFC chickens are, see where the McDonald's are. I challenge you, see where the KFC chickens are, see if it makes sense to you. I understand they use pedal carts to deliver the chicken over there. And they're in the most weird places from my viewpoint. But then KFC's, I think their objective is we're going to be everywhere. We don't have a location strategy. Anybody from KFC here? You wouldn't be raising your hand if you. They don't have a location strategy. They'll just be everywhere. And but Starbucks and McDonald's and the other retailers do. And also I contacted Harvard. They have some great maps online, many of which are historical, that will give you an idea of where China has been, and then to be used in your judgment as to where they're going. STR hotel data, University of Michigan. And here is a great resource that was just brought to my attention by Demographics Consulting, Sheila, and Susan Hain, the president of that company. And this is a recent publication on what is available for China. And I got their permission to include this in the bundle for you. And that's it. So now let's open up the Q&A. Yeah, okay, the light's in my eye, I can't see. Okay, we'll need to get a microphone over there because I can't hear what you're saying. I can tell you how I would calculate it, and thank you very much. That question is best addressed to Esri, how they actually calculated it. But I do go through how to calculate demand and supply in my book that I reference, Business Geography and Do Real Estate Market Analysis. I go through that in the book, and if one is calculating a gap for demand for, it depends on the real estate product. If you're calculating the gap for, let's say, office, my example in my Oxford book is from Hillsborough County, Tampa, and we look at NAICS codes, and we acquired projections of growth by NAICS code, calculated how much workers in each code consume in office space. Then based upon those projections, then we have then the projection for the county, and then looking at proportionate share, because they did not, there's nobody that I know of that calculates NAICS employment by small area, which I like to have. I look at a proportionate share. And so if a office market has, in the last 5 years, their proportionate share has been 5% of the total growth of the county, then that's what they get. And with that, then I went against the odds, and this was back in around 2000 when I did this with a former student of mine that is now at the Wharton School of Business in their GIS business school program, Paul Amos. And it's the name of the place that's right there on the water by the airport. Anybody from, I forget what, at the bridge that goes over the causeway over to St. Petersburg. And everybody said, oh, that's all built out. That's become the hottest office space in Hillsborough County. So, yeah, the method does work pretty good. You asked a great question. Itemize why it's great. One is you stumped me because I can't remember the name of the development. And two, we want to look at the geographic granularity, which is important to my judgment. And if I'm choosing to build a 1 million square foot Class A office building or shopping center, whatever, that is site specific. I want my forecast, my projection to be down to that site. I don't want it for the county. The management, like most of the people in this room, would be saying to their staff, this is what I want. And the one reference that you can give is my book as a place to start. It is no longer. Okay, I have to run off to the airport to get home. I apologize because for the travel arrangements made for me. So my limousine is waiting for me. Thank you very much.